The world-renowned forensic pediatric psychiatrist testified at Carneal's criminal trial that but for the influence of that movie, his training literally on the game Doom, very violent first-person shooter video game, he would not have killed.
I don't think so.
All right, guys. So, as you know, the Sony State of Play happened yesterday. And while I can talk about all the things that did make me really excited, and some of the things, I don't know, I was a little disappointed about, I felt like it was a little lackluster in my opinion, but they still showed off quite a few things that did get me hyped. And one of those things was the Mortal Kombat Legacy Collection. Now, I know they've already come out with collections prior, this is another release of a collection. I get that. But I was originally going to make a video talking about the Sony State of Play and the things I did enjoy from it. And then I sent a screenshot of the Mortal Kombat Legacy, announcement to an old friend of mine who is a huge Mortal Kombat fan, just like myself. And we got to talking about Mortal Kombat. And so that kind of inspired me to do this video instead. And what I want to talk about is, well, as the video title suggests, did Mortal Kombat make us violent? Now, we already know the answer to this, right? The answer is no. They do a study about this kind of thing almost every year, and they always come to the same conclusion. There's no substantial evidence to suggest violence in video games cause real-world violence. But that's not really what I want to talk about in this video, as far as I don't want to go through all the statistics and all the studies. I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about a little bit about my personal experience with this growing up and watching this unfold, because I was there as it was unfolding.
I was there, Gandalf. I was there 3,000 years ago.
Now, in regards to Mortal Kombat, did we lose our minds when we pulled off a fatality? Yes. Did we then try to rip out our friend's spine in real life? No, because we weren't deranged, we were gamers. And I feel like that's what the adults at the time kind of failed to understand, was that we, even as kids back then, as kids and teenagers, we were able to separate that fiction from reality. We knew hurting people in real life was bad. Just because we did it in a video game doesn't mean we were going to go out and do it in real life. We already were growing up with horror movies, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, those kinds of things. We had action movies like The Terminator. We already had a lot of that stuff already. And that we didn't watch those movies and say, yep, I'm going to go and just commit a bunch of violence. We didn't think that way. Yes, did we think it was cool and fun to see on the screen? Yes, but that's because we knew it was all a spectacle. Now, as you also know, there was another game. Okay, first of all, let me just backtrack from that real quick before I get into that. Mortal Kombat is not the first game to come under any kind of scrutiny over violence. In fact, I just found this out while I was researching this material for this video. And there was a game called Death Race back in the old Atari days, where you would basically just earn points by running over gremlins, according to the description, within a given time frame. So that was a thing. Maybe that's something I'll look more into later. Maybe I'll start doing some more retro video again. So I don't know. But no, now let me get back to what I was going to say. And that was Night Trap was another game that was really heavily scrutinized. Lethal Enforcers was kind of there too. I think the big problem they had with a lot of these games was because they were using digitized photos of real life actors and stuff. And I think that's where a lot of the problem came in. Now, as far as Night Trap goes, it was an okay game. It was kind of a fun novelty to have at the time, but me and my friends just kind of made fun of it more than taking it seriously. It just felt like we were watching a bad B horror movie. So nothing really too substantial there. I don't even really recall there being any real blood or too bad of violence in that game. I think the only reason they targeted that game was because a lot of the victims in the game were women. So I think that's the only reason that they really targeted that one. But I digress. Let's go back a little bit in time, though, to a little bit of some of my personal experience with this. I grew up in a somewhat religious family, not as bad as some. In fact, I had one friend that just wasn't allowed to play video games at all. And so he had to come over to my house and play games. You know, he lived with parents that believed that everything from video games to Dungeons and Dragons, of course, they believed in the whole satanic panic thing at the time. They believed all of that was just evil and that he was going to go to a very bad place if he continued to consume that kind of media.
You make the Lord very nervous. All right. I'm burning now. Take it easy. Hellfire is burning me alive. He's burning.
Also, we can't forget Jack Thompson, who was the first one to file a video games lawsuit targeting games like Quake, Resident Evil, Nightmare Creatures, a lot of those PlayStation games.
Apparently doesn't know that the American Psychological Association, the largest collection of psychologists in the world, issued a report in August of 2005 saying that there's a direct causal link between the play of violent video games by adolescents and minors and violence that we're seeing in the real world. So, Professor, how in the world could you say such a thing that there's no evidence? There are 30-some studies in the last several years participated in by the American Medical Association and others that draw a direct link between violent entertainment that teens play and real increased aggression and violence. So it's simply a misstatement. I assume you misspoke.
No, I didn't misspoke.
Well, you can't.
Unfortunately,
You're like
are ignorant of statistics and don't really understand those studies.
And he certainly isn't going to be the last person to do it, because then in 2019, if you all remember, there was also President Trump that was calling for a crackdown on violent video games.
Also today at the White House, President Trump met with leaders in the video game industry as part of his effort to curb gun violence in America. After the Parkland shooting, the president suggested violent video games may play a role in real-life violence. But the Entertainment Software Association says studies have found no connection and that games are played in other countries that don't have the same level of gun violence.
So they revisit the same thing every year, and the studies just give us the same outlook every single time. Now, there's one more event I want to bring up, and that is the Columbine shooting that happened in 1999. Now, if you remember, they blamed everything under the sun for this, from the video game Doom to music from Marilyn Manson. I remember that very well. All things that I was into myself. Now, I want to tell you a little bit of a personal story that happened while this went on. So this was in 1999. It was my senior year of high school, and I was your typical goth kid. You know, wore black, wore a trench coat, the whole 9 yards. And so for my last period of the day, I was a student assistant, actually. And I worked in the attendance office. So my job was to go around and collect the attendance sheets at the end of the day that the teachers left in their doors. That's how they took attendance back then. Well, so I'm walking around in my usual self, wearing my trench coat and my black goth attire. And as I'm walking by one of these classrooms, they were watching the news as this was unfolding. And all I could hear was,
well, Roz, they wore black trench coats, combat boots, and some wore. They hated jocks, loved the internet, and were fascinated by World War II. They were known as the Trench Coat Mafia. The question is, why didn't anyone know they'd turned so violent?
And here I am, picking up an attendance slip, and the next thing I know, all these eyes are on me, and I'm just like, I've got nothing to do with this. I'm going to go back and take off my coat. And that's what I did. I didn't wear it the rest of the year. The school tried to ban trench coats for the rest of the year. That didn't last very long, though, because again, it was, to me, it just felt like another scapegoat. Like, oh, trench coats, you're gonna come in and do some terrible things. No, had nothing to do with that. The point of this whole video is we have got to stop blaming things that are unrelated to real world things that are going on, and blaming video games and entertainment as a whole for what people are doing is disingenuous, considering this is just something that humans have been doing for a very long time. But all right, let me know what you guys think about this in the comments. Let me know what your personal experiences are growing up with this stuff. If you were around at the time, I would love to hear from you. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like. And if you're new here, please consider a sub. I would appreciate it. All right, guys, peace out.